Well, welcome to tonight's presentation, Understanding Period Problems. For those that don't know me, my name is Jen Marker. I'm a functional nutrition coach. I specialize in women's hormones. I also work with people on performance coaching as well as fat loss and then correcting basically things that we see on lab work like high cholesterol or imbalances in hormones or correcting like A1C and insulin, endometriosis, PCOS, like missing periods altogether. So I do quite a few things. I have a background in personal training. I've been in the fitness industry for over 15 years at this point in my life. Level 1 nutrition coaching, level 2 hormone specialist, mindset specialist, and then multiple mentorships with hormone mentors as well as functional nutrition mentorships. Tonight, I'm going to be going into basically understanding common period problems. So things like bloating and craving and like cramps. Like, what does that mean in regards to your hormones? Like, is it estrogen? Is it progesterone? Is it testosterone? Is it a change in serotonin or dopamine? Like, is inflammation a root cause for it? Is cortisol a root cause? So I'm going to be diving into those things tonight, and hopefully you guys will find benefit from it. I personally come from my own kind of hormonal chaos of a background where I didn't have a period for upwards of 15 years. And once I got my period back, I, started noticing all the wonderful things that come with having a healthy cycle and how to optimize it for training and nutrition and weight loss and performance goals. So I'm here to share that information with you and hope that it benefits you as much as it has benefited me and just kind of improved my life. All right. Shrink my, there we go. All right, so understanding period problems. The what, the why, the how of your period problems. So for far too long, women have been viewed as smaller versions of men when it comes to nutrition and exercise needs. They've been given standardized programming and nutrition plans with the expectations that their bodies will react the same way that a man's does. The problem is women are not men. Women have monthly hormonal fluctuations that actually affect the way their bodies respond to stress, nutrition, and exercise. These hormones fluctuate These hormone fluctuations can cause changes in sleep, hunger, mood, energy, cravings, as well as the body's ability to gain muscle and lose fat. Now, this is not a weakness, but a strength. And when we learn to optimize it or utilize it and optimize this properly, it can be a game changer when it comes to understanding the body and achieving goals. Now, women commonly struggle with things like cravings and weight gain and bloating around their periods. They see mood swings and PMS symptoms, irritability, weakness, or loss of strength, lack of motivation or feelings of failure, lack of willpower, sleep disruptions, hormonal imbalances, and binging. And women are often made to feel that they are helpless to their hormones. What they're dealing with is just part of being a woman. Birth control fixes your period when you have problems. Menopause is going to be terrible. Periods are supposed to be terrible. Cravings are just part of your cycle and there's no help for them. Feeling weak during the month is something you're doing wrong. Your period means failure and unavoidable weight gain. It's your fault. You're having a lack of willpower or motivation. Changes in your mood are unavoidable. Overall feelings of failure just because your body is not responding the same way that a man's would. Now, these struggles are far too common among too many women, and it doesn't have to be this way. When you learn to recognize what your hormonal needs are, like all those things can go away. So it's time for a change. What if there was a way to lessen these symptoms and feelings, if not eliminate them? Wouldn't you want that for yourself and those around you? It's time that women understand how truly powerful they are and how important their hormone fluctuations are. It's time to understand how to optimize these to create better results, adherence, and success, or a successful achievement of goals. No longer should a woman's hormones be looked at as something they've been cursed with. Instead, a woman should be taught how to harness these superpowers to understand and optimize every phase of their cycle. All right, so in order to understand what these hormones do, or when you might feel their effects, or how you should feel their effects, we need to know what the basics of these hormone fluctuations look like. So during the first half of the cycle, so day one of your period is day one of your flow. So first day of your period bleed. So then we see an increase in estrogen. Estrogen peaks right about ovulation and then drops off and has a lesser rise during the second half of your cycle. Progesterone is kicked off at ovulation. So we see that rise in progesterone, and that peaks about mid-luteal or last part of your cycle. So we're talking, if we're talking a 28-day cycle, which is what they consider the average length of a cycle, then we're talking right around day 21 when we should see that progesterone spike, or basically when it reaches its highest point. And then assuming no pregnancy occurs, then we see a drop off of progesterone leading into the next period. Now, right around ovulation, we see a slight bump in testosterone. So this is with the intention of increasing sex drive, because the body's intention is to get pregnant, because we're really only fertile for about, well, the egg is only viable for about 12 to 24 hours. So we, as women, have about a 5 to 6 day window of opportunity, because sperm can stay alive in cervical mucosa for about 5 days. So that's good to know. So things you should see: a slight increase in sex drive right around ovulation, a egg white type consistency for cervical mucosa. There's a change in basal body temperature right about ovulation. And then I'll go into what estrogen means and progesterone means, and what you should be feeling in association with these hormones in your cycle. All right. So let's understand the cycle as 2 phases. So we have our follicular phase, which is our first phase. So if we're assuming a 28-day cycle, then we're assuming that the follicular phase is day 1 through 14. So that's going to be the first day of your period flow, so actual bleed, not spotting. And that's when estrogen begins to rise and peaks at ovulation. Testosterone gets that little bump right before ovulation. Now we've got our luteal phase, which is that transition point from ovulation to the end of your cycle. So luteal phase is going to be day 15 through 28, once again, assuming a 28-day cycle. Now, an ovulatory cycle could be anywhere from 21 to about 42 days. So when we say on average 28-day cycle, that is assuming an average. Now, I won't really dive into long versus short cycles right now, but generally there is some sort of estrogen progesterone kind of potential imbalance that might be occurring there. So ovulation to your next period is how the luteal phase runs. Progesterone rises and then drops off, leading into the start of the next period. Estrogen has a lesser rise during this time and drops off as well. It's when hormones are at their lowest point, when all hormones are at their lowest point, that the period starts. Now we can look at the cycle as 4 parts. So we can look at it as essentially F1, or week 1, is essentially day 1 through 7. So figure the period starts and you have that estrogen that's rising. So things that happen during that time is you might notice your skin is a little bit more glowing, because you have a higher rate of cell turnover during that time. So your skin might look a little bit more radiant during that time. Then we've got F2, so figure second week, or day 7 through 14, end of your period. Hopefully your period isn't lasting 7 days, but maybe it is. end of your period to ovulation, so increasing estrogen, and you get that bump of testosterone. So you're going to see more of a sex drive. You're going to see more of a competitive, kind of outgoing kind of nature about things. Now we've got L1, which is the beginning of the luteal phase. So figure L1 is like day 15 through 21. So ovulation and then the rise of progesterone. And then we've got L2, day 21 through 28. So progesterone drops off, and that day 28 is the start of the next period. All right, so things to know about that week 1 and that rise of estrogen. So period starts, first day of period bleed. We've got day 1, and then estrogen begins to rise. So what do you want to be aware of during this time? So the estrogen rise. So there's the potential of rollover inflammation during the beginning of a woman's period. So this can cause feelings of bloating, lack of motivation at the start of your period. So rollover inflammation, and I will talk more about kind of what we need to do at the end of the cycle to manage inflammation, because higher amounts of inflammation are what will cause higher amounts of prostaglandins, which are what contract to expel the lining of the uterus. So if we're doing activities or consuming foods like alcohol, like things that are going to create higher amounts of inflammation in the body, we are going to see worsening or worsened symptoms associated with like PMS for that period. Things to note, the period that you experience this month is a product of the previous 90 days. So if you've had a stressful previous 90 days, like that might show up in the way your period presents itself. So back to the beginning. So energy starts to rise during this week, assuming that maybe there was a little bit more inflammation at the beginning of the cycle. We see energy start to rise. You're going to feel more outgoing, more productive, and more motivated. Serotonin and dopamine will increase during this time. Blood sugars will become stable. So that means you'll have less highs and lows when it comes to cravings and hunger. So less hunger and cravings. Improved recovery, higher immune system response, better ability to manage cortisol during this time. So estrogen is kind of that buffer. So I talked about this during my perimenopause presentation, like estrogen and progesterone are kind of your buffers against stress. Strength abilities will start to increase. Then we move into week 2. So figure this is day 7 through 14. So the end of your period until ovulation. So estrogen is continuing to rise during this time. And then right about ovulation, we're seeing that slight bump of testosterone, which will give that little kick of extra sex drive. So estrogen is continuing on the rise. It's going to peak at ovulation. We're going to see that testosterone bump right before ovulation. So from a workout standpoint, or if you're competitive, like you might feel a little bit more competitive during this time in your cycle. You might feel, more like you want to lift something heavier. And if you are someone, which I recommend that everybody use strength training, if you are someone that is working on strength training, this would be a great time in your cycle to try to lift something heavy, to go for a new 1 rep max or even a 5 rep heavy. This is essentially the strongest time in the month. So more outgoing, productive, motivated, increased serotonin and dopamine, stabilized blood sugars, less hunger, less craving, better recovery, strongest time of the month. And then we move into L1 or luteal week 1. So at this point, ovulation has kicked off progesterone. So what we want to be aware of, you may feel a little more empathetic and chill during this time. Like once ovulation is kind of kicked off, we see that progesterone starting to rise. We see a change in basal body temperature. The ovulation causes that rise in progesterone to occur. Progesterone has a calming effect on the brain and helps us feel calm and chill during this time of the month. So I will be diving into this, but if we're not feeling that way, it could have something to do with our progesterone levels. So when ovulation occurs, we see a slight rise in basal body temperature until our next period starts. Progesterone has an effect on resting heart rate and respiratory rate. So I use an Oura ring so I can kind of see those variations starting to occur. So I see temperature fluctuations, I see respiratory rate, and I see resting heart rate fluctuate. So I basically know when ovulation has occurred, plus, body cues as well. So the body's priorities turn inward during this time with the potential of carrying a child. So the immune system will downregulate to keep the body from attacking a potentially newly fertilized egg. Recovery is not your body's priority during this time. Progesterone has an effect on serotonin, dopamine, and blood sugar regulation. The body's preferred fuel sources shift during this time. So from a macro standpoint, I actually change macros to support the follicular phase versus the luteal phase. Training adjustments should follow a similar theme. Decreased estrogen and increases in progesterone. Basically the body, decrease estrogen and increases in progesterone. Basically the body doesn't handle cortisol as well during this time. If you are someone that you live in a high stress lifestyle environment, your body might do something called a progesterone steal. So you might see lower level of progesterone because your stress is too high. So this is essentially a preparation week for the next week when progesterone drops off, triggering an inflammatory response. By managing stress and inflammation during this time, it will decrease PMS symptoms in the next week. So this is the week that we really want to kind of buckle down on things and pay attention to how our body is responding. Because this week before your period starts can be easy. It can just be something where your period just starts and you feel good and you just bleed that day. Maybe you're a little bit more bloated, but like if you manage your nutrition, you can actually make it so you see barely any kind of changes on the scale. So progesterone drops off, figure around day 21. So just a little note, if you are to get lab work done, you want to be getting lab work done probably between day 18 and 22 to assess what your progesterone levels look like. This is the week that, assuming no pregnancy occurs, progesterone will drop off. This drop off in progesterone triggers an inflammatory response. It causes a change in sodium set point and water retention to occur. This change in water distribution changes plasma volume, which can cause a change in how much oxygen is actually brought to the muscles. Progesterone has an effect on your resting heart rate, respiratory rate, and basal body temperature. The body is experiencing an increased amount of inflammation during this time. Blood sugars are unstable, serotonin and dopamine are starting to drop, and the immune system is suppressed. So recovery is slower. The body does not respond well to stress during this time. All right. Any questions on that section? I'm going to assume that silence means that you guys understand everything.
No, I was just gonna say that it's crazy how progesterone drops off first in times of stress, and how, like, everything that I worked on with you, and I've just been really trying to continue to implement, and it's lengthened out my cycles and got a lot better. But I also am taking a little bit of extra progesterone just to support me in the luteal phase, and I think it's made a big difference. All the stress management and
Good.
support.
Yes. Yes. That's good. Yeah. What are you taking for progesterone? Is it prescribed or is it something?
No, it's actually over the counter. It's called Progest E, and it's one of the repeat ones. I can send you the link later,
Okay. Okay.
if you want to take a look at it.
Progon B is another one.
Yes, I did Progon B, but I've actually seen better results with this one. I don't know why. Yeah, it's interesting. I guess everyone's body's respond differently because I was on Progon B for, oh my gosh, I think like a year. And then
Okay.
I switched over and this is the second month and it's, yeah, made a difference. So like
Awesome.
I feel like the estrogen dominance, because I didn't have high estrogen, but the ratio was off, right? So I was relatively estrogen dominant, has
Yep,
made a difference like in my cycle. So
good.
I'll share it with you to have a look
Yes,
and see what you think.
please, because yeah, I'm always looking for different options. But yeah, I've seen some success with the Progon B for clients as well.
Yeah, awesome. No, I think it's great. I don't know why my body's responding better to it, but I'll take it. I'm happy.
Yes, exactly. It's a win.
Yeah.
Perfect. Good. Okay. Any other questions before I kind of move on? All right. All right, hormones that fluctuate throughout the cycle that we need to be aware of when we're looking at problems. So estrogen, progesterone, testosterone, serotonin, and dopamine, which are neurotransmitters that affect our mood, and then blood sugar regulation, and then how cortisol and inflammation can affect these. All right, so estrogen is produced primarily by the ovaries. It helps develop and maintain both the reproductive system and female characteristics like breasts and hips. It helps to control the menstrual cycle. It helps to keep cholesterol in check. It protects bone health, contributes to cognitive health, and it's also produced in fat cells. It is an integral part of the endocrine system. The endocrine system produces hormones that regulate metabolism, growth and development, tissue function, sexual function, reproduction, sleep, and mood. Estrogen rises during the first half of the cycle and then has a lesser rise during the second half. Estrogen stabilizes blood sugars, increases serotonin and dopamine, and decreases inflammation. So, common symptoms of low estrogen in women are things like increased urinary tract infections, irregular or absent periods, mood swings, hot flashes, breast tenderness, headaches, depression, trouble concentrating, and fatigue. Common symptoms of high estrogen, mood swings, anxiety, depression, insomnia, bloating, weight gain, hair loss, fatigue, irregular menstrual cycles, decreased sex drive, and breast tenderness. All right, now we have progesterone. So progesterone opposes estrogen and helps regulate the cycle. Progesterone prepares the uterus for the possibility of pregnancy. It thickens the uterine lining for the potentially fertilized egg. It eases anxiety and promotes memory, makes us feel calm, and empathetic, and chill. Healthy levels of progesterone act as a natural antidepressant, helps contribute to a restful night's sleep, and allows the body to use fat as an energy source. Progesterone is the precursor to GABA, which produces a calming effect on the brain. GABA helps to reduce anxiety, improve mood, promote lean muscle growth, and is helpful for fat burn. It has an effect on the respiratory system. It's created due to ovulation and the breakdown of the corpus luteum, which is the remnants of the follicle that the egg gets released from. So if someone is on birth control and birth control shuts down ovulation, they are not receiving progesterone. Generally, the progesterone synthetic hormone has a lot of the opposite effects that natural progesterone has. Progesterone rises during the second half of the cycle, or it rises during the luteal phase, and then it peaks midway through the luteal phase and then drops off. It's mainly produced due to ovulation, but also produced in lesser amounts by the adrenal glands. If a woman does not ovulate, she doesn't get progesterone. Like she'll get it from the adrenal glands, but it is minimal in comparison to what she gets from ovulation, which is why during menopause, the adrenals become the main producers of progesterone. All right, so signs of low progesterone: breast tenderness, endometriosis, fibroids and cysts, infertility issues, irregular cycles, extreme PMS symptoms, facial hair growth or hair loss, holding water, bloating, feeling stressed, nervous, or anxious, craving sugar regularly, depression, irritability, weight gain, hot flashes, PMS symptoms, menstrual cramps, spotting between cycles, heavy periods, insomnia, abdominal pain, headaches or migraines, pain and inflammation, low body temperature, hypothyroidism, and low sex drive. Some symptoms of high progesterone: anxiety, bloating, depression, reduced sex drive, weight fluctuations, fatigue, breast swelling, and or tenderness. I think the biggest thing to understand with these hormones is that we want that fine balance. We have like that sweet spot. And if it gets below that or it gets above that, we're going to see symptoms. All right, testosterone. Testosterone is a male sex hormone that is produced in lesser amounts or small amounts by a woman's ovaries. In combination with estrogen, it helps the woman's reproductive tissue, bone density, and muscle strength. Testosterone is often associated with sex drive. Right before ovulation, a woman experiences a slight bump in testosterone from the ovaries, which increases sex drive and the likelihood of the fertilization of an egg. Testosterone in combination with estrogen creates a great environment for muscle growth and a higher level of competitiveness. Now, signs of low testosterone in women. So sluggishness, muscle weakness, fatigue, sleep disturbances, reduced sex drive, weight gain, fertility issues. Signs of high testosterone in women: acne, deep voice, excessive hair on face and body, increased muscle mass, irregular periods, mood changes, or loss of libido. All right, so supporting your hormones. It's important to embrace a healing and supportive mindset when it comes to hormones. It is possible to improve your hormone health at any age. As we get older, hormonal problems can have a significant impact on our body. If we consider that hormones regulate our body weight, metabolism, growth, and development, sexual function, reproduction, sleep, body temperature, emotions, and even what we want to eat and how we digest our food, it makes sense that we would want to support keeping them healthy always and forever. As a coach, I work to understand what messages someone's body is telling them about how we need to support and create health. So your hormones are not broken. A lot of people, when they see things, they see their hormones as broken. But the truth is, our hormones aren't broken. They're responding to the environment to support or promote your survival. So where we see a problem or think they're broken is that the body's need for survival doesn't generally align with our aesthetic desires or our desired body composition. Because when the body chooses to make these or create these signs and symptoms, the body is like, hey, I have this root problem that needs to be addressed, and you're not addressing it, so I'm going to take matters into my own hands. And generally that is when the body will offload things like muscle mass and store body fat, or it'll create discomfort, the hot flashes, the painful periods, because it's like, hey, I'm responding to additional inflammation that's in my environment. I'm responding to additional cortisol or stressors that are in my environment. So when looking at your hormones, don't just look for, okay, I need to take this pill that my doctor is giving me because my doctor says it's going to fix my hormone problems, because it's not fixing the problem if the reasons why that problem occurred are still there. So the goal is to fix why that occurred in the first place. So is it inflammation? Is it stress? Is it serotonin? Is it dopamine? Is it because, was it your estrogen that chose to dysregulate? Was it your progesterone? If it's progesterone, like maybe it's because you are dealing with higher amounts of stress in your environment. Maybe it's higher amounts of inflammation, like maybe it's a low body fat, high body fat. So when we look at things, just understand, like, look at the messages your body is sending you. Your body is trying to talk to you and tell you what is wrong. And it's, about looking at what I just went over, like, what are some common signs of estrogen being off, progesterone being off, like testosterone being off, and being able to be like, okay, like that is what's going on. Why are those hormones making those changes? Like, what do I need to change in my nutrition, my exercise, my lifestyle to support my body so that I don't have to deal with this for the rest of my life? Because like nobody wants to deal with that. And you can change your hormones at any age. So I am not a doctor, and this is not about supplementation or medication. It's important to understand why something may be happening so we can address the root cause of the problem and support the healing process. So supporting your hormones. So ways to support your hormones. Eat a diet that supports your hormones and the nutrients your body needs to thrive. So that means getting lots of fruits and vegetables in, because each of your hormones has certain vitamins and minerals that support its ability to create and detox. So eat a lot of variety, like lots of fiber. Maintain a healthy weight, exercise regularly, eat healthy fats, reduce or eliminate alcohol, sleep appropriately, and reduce stress. All right, things that negatively affect your hormones: obesity and insulin resistance, too much exercise, not enough healthy fats, alcohol consumption, which raises blood sugars, which elevates insulin, and chronic stress, so which elevates cortisol, which can also reduce testosterone. All right, so I talked about serotonin and dopamine and how they had a rise and fall during your cycle as well. So serotonin is a neurotransmitter or chemical messenger that's involved in many processes throughout the body, from regulating mood to supporting or promoting smooth digestion. Serotonin is primarily produced by the gut. It regulates your mood, sleep, appetite, eating, digestion, learning ability, and memory. It's a key hormone that stabilizes our mood, it helps us have feelings of well-being and happiness. It really impacts your entire body. It enables brain cells and other nervous systems cells to communicate with each other, helps promote positive feelings and social behavior. Estrogen increases serotonin during the follicular phase, and progesterone drop-off decreases it during the luteal phase. So if serotonin is low, you might feel anxious, low, or depressed, feel irritable or aggressive, have sleep issues or feel fatigued, feel impulsive, experience nausea and digestive issues, crave sweets and carbohydrate-rich foods. So looking at this and knowing that when progesterone drops, serotonin drops, I think about how often we have, or not anymore, but how often cravings are cited as a problem, and irritability and sleep issues and feeling impulsive and feeling anxious. So when serotonin starts to drop and we feel these things start to occur, it's more a result of that drop off in serotonin, not necessarily a lack of one's own abilities to manage these. So supporting serotonin. You cannot directly get serotonin from food, but you can get tryptophan, which is an amino acid that's converted to serotonin in the brain. Tryptophan is found primarily in high protein foods, including turkey and salmon. Exercising triggers the release of tryptophan into the blood. Spending time in the sunshine appears to help increase serotonin levels as well. 5-HTP can easily enter your brain and produce serotonin. Probiotics support gut health, which can support the production of serotonin in the gut. So eating probiotic-rich foods such as yogurt and fermented foods such as kimchi or sauerkraut can help to support that. Self-care like massage therapy helps increase serotonin and dopamine, and it also helps to decrease cortisol. All right, dopamine. Dopamine is a chemical messenger that regulates mood, motivation, memory, attention, and muscle movement. It plays a vital role in the brain's pleasure and reward systems. It is released during pleasurable situations and stimulates one to seek out pleasurable activities. Things that elicit a dopamine response can include things like food, sex, and some drugs and other stimulants. Estrogen increases dopamine during the follicular phase, and progesterone's drop-off decreases it during the luteal phase. So if dopamine is low, you might feel a low mood, feel fatigued, have reduced sex drive, experience sleep issues, have attention difficulties, and crave high-fat foods and chocolates, which all sound very familiar. All right, so what can you do to support dopamine? So eat enough protein. The amino acid tyrosine plays a critical role in the production of dopamine. Eat less saturated fat. Saturated fats may disrupt dopamine signaling in the brain when consumed in large quantities. Exercise often. So it's recommended to boost endorphin levels and improve mood. Get enough sleep. When dopamine is released in the brain, it creates feelings of alertness and wakefulness. Dopamine release looks similar to a cortisol release throughout the day, and that we have a larger amount released at the time when we wake up, and then it falls throughout the day until the time that we go to sleep. So a lack of sleep can disrupt this natural rhythm. Listen to music. Listening to music increases activity in the reward and pleasure areas of the brain, which are rich with dopamine receptors. Get enough sunlight. Periods of low sunshine exposure can lead to reduced levels of mood-boosting neurotransmitters, and sunlight exposure can increase them. Supplement and nutritional considerations. Your body requires several vitamins and minerals to create dopamine. These include iron, niacin, folate, and vitamin B6. If your body is deficient in one or more of these nutrients, you may have trouble making enough dopamine. All right, so insulin. So understanding blood sugar regulation. So insulin dysregulation is one of the places that we can see increased amount of inflammation come from. It can also be one of the reasons why we see hanger. So understanding that during the follicular phase, we have better blood sugar regulation just naturally because of the presence of estrogen. And then during the luteal phase, progesterone will actually cause more of a dysregulation or more of an insulin resistant type environment. So it becomes really important to understand how, blood sugars have an effect on our bodies in general. So if we look over here at this little graph, so if we have too many calories or carbs per meal, blood sugars spike. So this is another thing that can be a problem if someone is like grazing all day versus like eating specific meals, and basically they have that, rise, and then it kind of falls, and then it rises with the next meal, and it kind of stays in this kind of safe range or stable blood sugars. If someone is always eating things up top here and keeping their blood sugars high, then that's going to cause their body to potentially store fat and cause their blood sugars to be high too often. When we're in this kind of stable blood sugar range, then the body releases fat, protects lean muscle, and we see less cravings. So this is kind of what I would say more of that follicular phase probably looks like. Basically, estrogen's presence will cause more regulation in blood sugars, where if I was to, well, I wouldn't assign that because this is more if you skip meals or restrict calories or carbs or exercise on an empty stomach even, basically blood sugars drop too often. Or if we're talking about, say, the luteal phase, and we have unstable blood sugars, then you might have a meal and have a big spike in blood sugars and then a crash, which causes that hunger and cravings to occur. So if our blood sugars are in the low position a little bit too often, the body is going to burn muscle and hold on to fat, and we're going to see energy crashes and cravings. Oh, question. Okay, I'll add you to my email. Thank you. All right, so insulin is the hormone that helps the body properly utilize sugars in the form of glucose. So consider insulin the key that opens up the cells to allow for the glucose to leave the bloodstream and be taken into the cells for energy. Glucose comes from carbs. Insulin is what helps the body use carbs. So blood sugar stability changes throughout the cycle. Estrogen creates better blood sugar stability, and progesterone creates more of an unstable blood sugar levels. So more of an insulin resistant type environment versus an insulin sensitive environment during the follicular phase. Blood sugar crashes can lead to low energy and craving. So insulin's primary function is determining carb usage, but its secondary function is involved with how the body utilizes or stores and utilizes fat. The largest factor that determines how insulin is utilized depends on the absorption rate of food. Proteins, fibers, and fats have a slower absorption rate than foods found higher on the glycemic index. This means they will have a less of an effect on blood sugar levels compared to those foods that are higher on that glycemic index. So when we're looking to kind of create better blood sugar stability, we want to create a good glycemic load within a meal. So that means having protein, carbs, fats, and fibers so that we see more of this and less of these like high spikes, saying if a meal has a too high of or too many foods with a high glycemic index within them and not enough fats, proteins, and fibers. All right, so insulin and blood sugar regulation factors. So insulin and stress. In times of stress, blood sugar levels rise to mobilize energy for the fight or flight response. This can cause increases in insulin levels and under chronic situations, improper insulin usage or insulin resistance. So when cortisol is present, basically the body is working to supply or dump glucose into the bloodstream for utilization to run from the bear. Now, problem is most people are not running from a bear. They are sitting at their desk. Their boss has given them an assignment and a deadline, and it is basically stress has been decoupled from activity. So then that glucose keeps circulating in the bloodstream. Now, another thing that happens, so figure we have someone that is skipping meals or they're chronically skipping meals or they yo-yo diet, so they've created some sort of dysregulation with their leptin and ghrelin. When ghrelin upregulates due to kind of that chronic like yo-yo dieting or like skipping of meals, like irregularity, we'll just call it that. Basically, that ghrelin will dump fatty acids and glucagon into the bloodstream. So generally someone that is yo-yo dieting and kind of skipping meals or, trying to pursue a fat loss phase. They're trying, but they're probably not doing it correctly. And they're in a high stress environment. So they end up getting all this glucose dumped into the bloodstream, fatty acids, glucagon, and then they end up in that situation where they're kind of looking at prediabetes or diabetes. So one of the things that I do with this is a flush protocol. So basically retraining insulin to fire appropriately, like reducing cortisol, reducing inflammation, and getting insulin to regulate properly. Because if we're seeing too much insulin resistance will cause inflammation, but also inflammation will cause more insulin resistance. So things like circadian disruptions can cause increased levels of inflammation. So there was a study that I saw recently where they put some through sleep deprivation. And the sleep deprivation, they took inflammatory markers every hour within the study, and they, created like I think it was like 80 hours of sleep deprivation. And they saw increased in inflammation throughout that entire period, just increase after increase after increase. So if we consider that, like, I'll bring it back to the cycle. If we consider that our bodies are dealing with higher amounts of inflammation during the last half of your cycle, or the last quarter of your cycle when that progesterone drops off, and people are experiencing sleep disruptions and blood sugar dysregulation, then we're seeing potential for more inflammation coming from just actions in your day, like not necessarily food, not necessarily activity or exercise, but we're talking like just the potential for an increase in insulin resistance from that inflammation from the potential of lack of sleep. So just things to think about, when, like, inflammation is probably one of the biggest root causes for hormone dysregulation, whether it's insulin, estrogen, progesterone, testosterone, like gut health issues, like those can all cause additional inflammation as well. So my advice, if you are dealing with any sort of dysregulation in hormones, look at your sources of inflammation. So let's talk about, back to what I have here. Sorry, I digress, my bad. Exercise and insulin levels. So all forms of exercise and movement can improve insulin sensitivity and the body's ability to manage blood sugars. So just think about it this way, the more muscle you have, the more like key holes available for that insulin to attach to pull that glucose into the cells. So strength training and increasing muscle mass is huge for helping to support blood sugar balance. Alcohol and insulin. Alcohol raises blood sugar levels and keeps insulin active in the bloodstream longer. Improper sleep and insulin. Just one night of poor sleep can cause a slight increase in insulin resistance. Undersleeping can increase the stress hormone cortisol and decrease glucose tolerance. If blood sugars are elevated, it can actually disrupt the body from getting into REM sleep, which can lead to an ongoing cycle of poor sleep. Yes, we found that out with you. Yes, for sure. Cortisol and inflammation. So cortisol in normal amounts is not bad. We actually need it. Like everything, it's when we have too much of it that it becomes a problem. Cortisol actually helps control blood sugar levels. It regulates metabolism, reduces inflammation, aids with memory, helps regulate salt and water balance to help control blood sugars, and helps mobilize fuel sources during times of stress. Overproduction of cortisol can cause insomnia, excess belly fat, anxiety, extreme fatigue, and a whole host of other problems, including HPA axis dysfunction. The female body is more reactive to cortisol in general and doesn't tolerate it as well during the luteal phase compared to the follicular phase. The drop-off of progesterone mid-luteal phase causes an inflammatory response in the body, which means higher levels of inflammation become present. PMS symptoms can be worsened by higher levels of inflammation. All right, what can cause inflammation? So consumption of processed foods, high sugars, too much training, too much cardio, not getting enough sleep, not eating enough healthy fats, poor gut health, emotional stress, and insulin resistance. So special cases and scenarios or considerations. So PCOS. PCOS is polycystic ovary syndrome. A hormonal disorder causing enlarged ovaries with small cysts. Women with PCOS may not ovulate and may have high levels of androgens. PCOS can cause missed or irregular periods, excessive hair growth, acne, infertility, and weight gain. Things that help PCOS: balancing hormones and reducing inflammation and balancing blood sugars, because PCOS generally has a insulin resistant type element to it. So there's actually 4 types of PCOS. So the most common one is insulin resistant PCOS. Now there are some other ones that are more, or they run the potential of being something that's more temporary. So they exhibit the same symptoms, but they are brought on by something else. So for example, post-pill PCOS. So this can be the effect of coming off birth control. So we see higher amounts of androgens. So basically, as the body tries to rebalance its hormones after being on the pill, there's something called an androgen rebound effect that can occur. So that can cause higher amounts of androgens to be present. You'll see potential for irregular cycles and like the potential for insulin resistance. So there's just a whole host of things that are more associated with hormones trying to find their balance again versus it being a permanent problem. But on tests and symptom wise, it'll come across as PCOS. Adrenal PCOS, so experienced by a woman experiencing high levels of stress, and their body is basically reacting abnormally to stress. Inflammatory PCOS, or a hidden cause PCOS. So generally tied to chronic inflammation, which could come from anything from environmental to psychological sources. Endometriosis. So this is when the tissue that normally grows on the inside of the uterus grows on the outside. Very painful. Common symptoms are pain and menstrual irregularities. If untreated, it can lead to complications like infertility, debilitating pain, adhesions, and ovarian cysts. Ovarian cysts are fluid-filled sacs or pockets on the surface of the ovaries. So it can be inherited, so it can be something passed down. So common ways or things that we can do to support these. So consume a diet that supports stabilizing blood sugars. Consume a diet that supports preferential fueling for each phase of the cycle. Support serotonin and dopamine through nutrition and gut health. Decrease inflammation through nutrition and activity. Support hormones for increased predictability and health of the cycle. All right, so let's revisit this list. So things that women generally struggle with in regards to their cycle. So we've got cravings, weight gain and bloating, mood swings, PMS symptoms and cramps, irritability, weakness or loss of strength, lack of motivation, feelings of failure, lack of willpower, sleep disruptions, hormonal imbalances, and binging. So with everything that we've learned, we can kind of take some of these things and identify their causes. So for example, cravings. So decreased serotonin and dopamine can cause those cravings for chocolate, fatty foods, sugars, high carbs. So we've got, you know, the unstable blood sugars, like we can see the highs and the lows. So that, you know, drop off of, or that drop in blood sugars that can cause cravings to occur and hunger to occur. I didn't mention this, but women actually experience a slightly higher metabolic rate during the luteal phase. So that can also increase cravings. Progesterone balance. And if someone is in too much of a deficit, then they're going to really experience those cravings going into that luteal phase. Bloating and weight gain. So changes in sodium set point. So that's going to cause redistribution of water. That triggered inflammatory response. So higher amounts of inflammation are present in the body. Mood swings. So we've got unstable blood sugars, serotonin and dopamine levels drop off. Estrogen and progesterone balance are going to play a role there. PMS symptoms like cramping. So I talked about prostaglandins and how, like, when we see increased amount of inflammation, we're gonna see an increase in prostaglandins. So that's gonna cause more cramping. And then depending on what your estrogen progesterone balance looks like, that can also be another reason why we see those cramps and PMS symptoms. All right, so what do you need to do to support your hormones to optimize getting to your goals? So managing inflammation, balancing blood sugars, reducing your stress, sleep, supporting your liver and its ability to detox, and supporting your gut and its ability to absorb nutrients. Talk more about the sodium set point. So the sodium set point, so that change in sodium set point, what do you want me to say? Like, talk more about it. Like, when we experience that change in sodium set point, that can cause more water retention to occur. So in doing so, basically we want to watch our sodium. So your body will crave more sodium, but from the standpoint of managing water retention, you might want to actually keep your sodium a little bit lower. Does that kind of answer your question? A very low sodium from a mineral stance. So you would want to probably have more electrolytes. I really like the element packets personally. Tested. So the elements are LMNTs.
Oh, okay, cool.
Mhm.
Awesome. Yeah, it's interesting. I've got my minerals, sorry, I've got really bad allergies and hay fever, but yeah, my levels are a little off. So I was just curious about that. Thank you for clarification.
Yeah, I like to start my day with like an electrolyte pack. Like, I'll have like a big smoothie, and then I'll have like my greens, and then I'll have my electrolytes. And if I feel like I'm sweating a lot, I'll have an extra one throughout the day. And let's see. All right. So knowledge is power. So understanding your hormones allows you to fully take advantage of your naturally given superpowers. And, viewing them as superpowers makes it feel so much better versus like viewing it like a curse or something you've been burdened with. Like, I always think, like, when my period starts, I'm like, yes, like my superpowers have just arrived. Like, I'm gonna crush it. So knowing your hormones lets you know when the best time to push is and when it's better to pull back and turn your focuses inward or to other tasks. This knowledge allows for you to no longer feel like you're fighting against a current or that's pushing you in the opposite direction. By learning to sync with your cycle, you can not only learn how to cycle your training and nutrition, but also your hormone support to appropriately align with the body for better results, and achieving a more productive life. This knowledge can help you best align with your body during the different times in your cycle and as well as different phases in your life. All right, so I do offer some programs. So I have functional nutrition coaching, which is generally one that would involve like a meal plan and lab work evaluation, weekly calls. Basically, what I talked about, the whole flush of reducing inflammation, resetting cortisol, leptin, and ghrelin, resetting insulin sensitivity. I also have just individualized nutrition coaching, which is more set for like fat loss and performance goals, cycle specific training and nutrition programs. And then I do on occasion do groups as well. So if there is something that you're ever interested in, there are options. Any questions?
Amazing as always. And
Thank
I'm just trying to like promote awareness to the coaches. So I've got 3 coaches who work on my team now, and just about like, the certifications and things you do as well, because you're still doing those, right?
Yep. Yeah. I haven't
'Cause
offered
that-
it in a while, but if there was
Okay.
like a group of people that wanted to, then I would do
Okay.
it.
Okay, cool. Yeah, because that's why Christy came tonight, and I've got 2 other coaches on the team that are just loving learning as much as possible about hormones. So I will just keep me in the loop about all of that as well, and I can let
Yeah.
them know. So
Well, yeah, and if they have like a certain time that you guys are like, yeah, we've got like
Let's
4
do it.
people and you
Okay.
guys want to do it, like, just let me know and I'll tell you what weekend works best for me.
Okay, perfect.
Okay.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Jen, as always.
Absolutely.
Sorry that I'm not ever on video, but
No worries. Sorry, I've been like coughing. I feel like I've got a
Oh
little
my
like.
gosh, no, I've got hay fever hell, so I totally get it. Well, you probably don't have that much in Arizona though. Right?
Well, Derek is so, maybe I'll just stop my screen share and stop recording.